This is the James Crepea Show.
We've got a blind date with destiny.
And it looks like she's ordered the lobster.
Oregonian columnist James Crepea.
I had some crackpot dynamite reporter at the first press conference ask me how in the heck we're going to possibly throw the ball when they keep a lid on their covers and who's the best pass rusher you've ever played against.
We're not the favorites. We're the other guys.
KORE 1050 and 95.7. Fox Sports Eugene. Here is the James Crepea Show, presented by Dairy Mart.
Hit the lights and lock the doors. Welcome, everybody, to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene on this Thursday, September the 5th. I am James Crepea, the Oregon Ducks beat reporter for the Oregonian and Oregon Live. You can read all my work covering the Ducks on a day-to-day basis, and we will get to them here shortly. Today's guest will be Chris Murray of the Nevada Sports Network at 4:30, and Sean Keeler. He covers covers the Colorado Buffaloes. I was going to say covers Buffalo. Covers the Colorado Buffaloes for the Denver Post. We'll chat with him at 5:30 as Colorado's coming off a win over Colorado State and preparing to face Nebraska here on Saturday. But we start today. Usually it will 99% of the time be in the college sports realm. But because today it is just the peak of madness with this ongoing saga that is with Antonio Brown.
Hit the light, will you?
And boy, somebody hit something, or nearly hit something, down in Oakland, according to the various reports. So for those who may not have seen it over the last several hours, the ongoing saga continues with Antonio Brown and the Oakland Raiders. Most recent situation popping up yesterday between him and Raiders general manager Mike Mayock. There was a confrontation, a heated exchange, some kind of brouhaha, if you will, between the two men. Obviously, much of this stemming from the fine that the Raiders imposed on Antonio Brown for his absences during the preseason. That $54,000 fine, which we mentioned on yesterday's show, that Brown responded to by posting to Instagram, indicating that when your own team is hating and etc., and saying that the devil don't lie and everybody's going to pay and this and that, and taking a picture of the letter that Mayock sent detailing and outlining the fines that Antonio Brown was going to receive. Well, it didn't exactly take very long, and it didn't take a great genius to realize that maybe Mike Mayock may not like that very much. Maybe that this old school football guy, maybe he's not a big fan of the idea of airing all of the internal workings and whatnot publicly. I'm not saying that Antonio Brown should have been happy that he was being fined, but given that, again, he was the only player in the league who was dealing with this helmet situation, and that the team was more than accommodating with his rather ridiculous foot injury, that maybe after the fine, which I again say absolutely was going to end up being covered by this helmet endorsement and then some, that he should have just said, hey, you know what, cost of doing business. So be it. What you gonna do? Everything, bygones be bygones. Nope. He puts it out there as if for everybody. Clearly, Mayock didn't like it. The two got into a, as I say, argument based on the reports from Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport. Rappaport saying it did not get physical, according to sources. But after a screaming match, Brown told Mayock that he would hit him in the face and then punted a football and said, "Fine me for that." Well, lo and behold, they're going to do more than that. The Raiders are strongly considering suspending Brown for at least the season opener. This is the quote from Mayock at his press conference today. Antonio Brown is not in the building today. He's not going to be practicing. I don't have any more information. When we do, I'll get it to you. That's it for today. For those very, very avid and tech-savvy and obsessive out there, they have managed to track that Antonio Brown has unfollowed the Raiders and Derek Carr, who has to be thinking, like, what in the world did my organization do here? What in the world is going on here? On Instagram, and has now apparently started following members of the Ravens organization. So read into that what you will. Mind you, Antonio Brown is 30 or 31 years old, and this is how he is conducting himself.
So do you think they're going to trade him? Or do you think they might invoke that contract clause?
Well, the first part is dealing with let's deal with the here and now.
Okay.
The here and now is he's not there today after yesterday's altercation with Mayock, and that they are weighing their options, according to, again, multiple reports, both Rappaport and Schefter leading the way on this. According to report from ESPN, in part from Schefter and in part from Paul Gutierrez, who covers the Raiders for ESPN, there are several within the Raiders organization that want to move on from Brown. This is according to Schefter and sources from around the league. Believe that the team could suspend him with the idea of trying to void the $30+ million guaranteed in his contract.
Okay.
That is the here and now. Now, our guest from last week, Mike Tannenbaum, who I told everybody to follow on Twitter because he gives great insight into games, but also great insight into personnel matters such as this coming up. He mentions a couple hours ago and tweeting about this, Tannenbaum says the significance of suspension is that it would void, assuming normal contract language, his $29.125 million in contract guarantees. However, if he's on the active roster on opening day, his $14.6 million in salary becomes guaranteed because he's a veteran. They could suspend him. So that is the here and now and the finances and the inner workings. They could suspend him and release him, and then they would owe him nothing in terms of guaranteed money. The Raiders, in all likelihood, would try to recoup their $1 million signing bonus as well. That is from Mike Tannenbaum, obviously a former general manager, former vice president of player personnel with the Dolphins, GM of the Jets. Again, he joined us last week to break down Justin Herbert and the Oregon-Auburn season opener beforehand. That coming literally from a former team executive.
So let me ask you this. If I understand correctly, that window that they can do it is 5 days. Is that correct?
I believe. And there's other sides of this where the union could come in. They could file a grievance and fight it. And that could be,
Because
as we've learned, there's all kinds of grievances and means by which for arbiters with this whole ordeal. But this is now just the latest with this particular situation.
Because by suspending today and all the way through Monday, that would be your 5 days. Monday would be the 5th day.
Right. And ultimately, you're going through the start of the league year.
Which means he wouldn't be on the roster.
The start of the season.
Yeah. I don't know. Could they release him on that 5th day? I mean, because then he would
they
still
can release him whenever they want.
Because he'd still be on the roster technically on Monday,
if
which
they
means that part of the clause.
They could get rid of him today.
Okay.
That's not the releasing part. I think they're worried first and foremost again with the here and now and the money.
Yeah.
That being first. But as far as can an organization release him, they can release anybody they want anytime. It's just the financial implications of it. So because you're talking about before the start of the season and when the money becomes guaranteed, yes, these are the things that are coming into play with Antonio Brown at the moment.
Okay.
So that is the major news side of it. Some of the additional fallout that has come out there. Some of the many voices, as you can imagine, who have chimed in. Here, far and wide, from those who actually go by name to those random Twitter accounts that just put out something rather amusing. Obviously, the first thing everybody did is instantly suggest that the Patriots would be trading a 7th-round pick for in a far-off decade for Antonio Brown. And somebody tweeted out a whole mock correspondence to Antonio Brown as if he were on the Patriots saying, well, the Patriots put up all these yards and touchdowns, whatever, but did you were you annoyed that Brady didn't throw to you? And his response being that he's just happy to be a member of the organization and a great organization like the Patriots. So that was obviously one line of thinking that got out there. One of the players, by the way, involved in supposedly holding back Antonio Brown in this altercation, according to numerous reports from Oakland, Vontez Burfict was involved in separating Antonio Brown, holding him back from Mike Mayock.
Well, I think Burfict would have thrown him at Mayock.
So, needless to say, there is also those who pointed out the obvious that Burfict, the guy who knocked Antonio Brown out, who then got knocked out by Juju Smith-Schuster for knocking Brown out, then got let go by the Bengals. Brown got jettisoned by the Steelers. They end up together, and now the guy who knocked him out is holding him back from knocking out another guy. That has been illustrated and put forth as well. That observation.
Jeez.
That these two have obviously the past that they have, and now lo and behold, boy, what a situation that they find themselves in by coincidence and happenstance. But one of the many voices, rather amusingly, who chimed in on this whole ordeal, none other than O.J. Simpson.
Oh, no.
Choosing to weigh in.
Oh, no.
And no, I do not follow O.J. I am not one of those, and if you do, that's fine, whatever. I do not, but because it was something that caught a lot of people's attention, you can't help but see O.J.'s short video on this situation. And you even have O.J. Simpson weighing in on Antonio Brown, saying that Antonio Brown, he drafted his fantasy team, O.J., and had Andrew Luck. So obviously that's not working out so well. And apparently also drafted Antonio Brown, which clearly the Juice's fantasy team is not going so well.
So basically, anybody he drafted on his fantasy team is now jinxed. And the rest of the lineup, whoever they are, they better find out who their agents are and get ready to move.
Well, once I saw this, and it is a rather amusing thing, and if you want to see it, that's fine. Whatever. Okay. But my mind now wanders in this direction. Because ultimately, whether Antonio Brown is with the Raiders or not, whatever, obviously I understand the impact it makes on a football field. Don't get me wrong. I understand how great a player he is. But he is clearly a bigger nuisance and bigger headache than he is worth to many organizations. The Steelers have to be just cackling today. That they got a third-round pick. I think it was Field Yates of ESPN who actually put out, at the time of the trade, the thought process was, man, they only got a third and a fifth for Antonio Brown, and now today they got a third and a fifth for Antonio Brown. So that is why, look, he is going to overstay his welcome virtually anywhere. There are few organizations that could ever look to bring him in, and you've already had Dan Wetzel and plenty of others pose the question of, does he even want to keep playing football anymore?
Right.
Is this really something that this guy even wants to keep doing? And Ryan Leaf tweeted something out to that effect, because the immaturity that is being shown by Antonio Brown, not just with this particular altercation and situation. It's the totality of it all. It's the helmet, it's the feet, it's the behavior, it's blaming everybody for everything and airing everything out there and doing everything that you would see, quite frankly, like you would see from a 12 or 13-year-old in middle school. The behavior on social media, all this stuff, everything that goes with it is childish. That if you're a professional and you're going through and making the federal case that he was out of the helmet ordeal and everything else, then sometimes you just got to deal with some small things. And I saw some folks who also saw initially in the immediate aftermath, in the immediate breaking news of everything with Mayock, that there were people who felt, well, look, Mayock should be the one to move on. No, he should not. No, he should not. The organization employs you, not the other way around. Not the other way around. Players, they're obviously the professional athlete, and the money and the platform that they have is tremendous, and their value is there, and they are compensated accordingly. That's fine. But the employer, the organization is the employer. The executives, as part of that organization, are the employer. They don't have to take anything lying down.
No, if you did that to your boss.
The rules. That's why, frankly, even when I saw early in Hard Knocks, the interaction that Gruden was having with Jonathan Abram.
Yeah.
And Abram was saying, well, you're not going to cut me. I'm sitting there watching that, and I'm going, Well, on one hand, I kind of get what Abrams saying here, and there does have to be a give and a take with the more modern player. I get it, okay? With a first-round pick and a talented player as he is. However, tell me with a straight face that Bill Belichick is listening to that. That's something that's going to happen inside One Patriot Way from anybody. It's not. It's not. And I can assure you, I don't think Gruden was enjoying the conversation because it lasted. The exchange only went so long before he went to, all right, look, if you can't do it, then.
Honestly, thinking back to that Hard Knocks, it looked like to me that Gruden was like, do I want to punch him?
Gruden walks a tight line, has to, as all coaches do. They have to walk a tight line by being the player's advocate and player's coach and not being a total, militaristic type. I get it. But, again, you still are part of the structure of the organization, and you still have to ultimately support some of the things that are going on, like Mayock's having. But going back to the whole OJ weighing in part of this, my mind goes this direction. Who's in OJ's fantasy league? That's what I want to know. I want to read a story.
You want to out everybody that's in it?
You want to know? Not out. I don't care. I don't mind if you are. I just want to know who's in it. Who is involved? Who set up the draft?
And do they know?
Was it held at someone's house? Was it sponsored by somebody? Is Pedro Guerrero in the league with OJ all these years later? This is where my mind wanders in watching and seeing all of this nonsense unfurl.
Did they have their draft at Buffalo Wild Wings?
Right. Was there a big board? Did they have to walk up? Did they have to announce it? How'd it go down? That's what I'm curious about when I see that. Because, there's the story and there's the drama to it all and the happenings of the league. Okay. But then you see just the tangential stuff that becomes entertaining. And like I say, then my mind wanders off in that direction. I say, wait a minute. OJ's weighing in on Antonio Brown. Like, on one hand, I want to put out there just go like, this is what Twitter was built for. This is what it was right here. For this absurdity, this ridiculousness. It was rather amusing, I must say. So, yes, that is the latest with the Antonio Brown saga involving the altercation with Mike Mayock. Again, he is not with the Raiders at the moment. He may or may not be suspended. They're dealing with, obviously, a tremendous amount of guaranteed money that they may or may not be trying to get out of. It's a question of, is the organization going to continue with Antonio Brown or not? So that is where things stand with the Raiders and him. But, yes, obviously, the Twitterverse and many other places cannot help itself today in weighing in on this matter in all directions. If you have a particular opinion on this and take on this, give us a call on the Davis Roofing Hotline at 541-343-KORE. That's 541-343-5673. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. We have a giveaway for folks who are listening. If you want to attend Saturday's game between the Oregon Ducks and Nevada Wolfpack, keep listening to the program. We will be giving away a pair of tickets during the 5 o'clock hour. So do keep listening. We will let you know. But we will be giving away a pair of tickets to this weekend's game here. So, again, you'll be giving us a call on the Davis Roofing Hotline at 541-343-KORE. If you want to do that now, you can. You can chime in on some things. But if you want to get the pair of tickets, we'll be doing that during the 5 o'clock hour. To that game, we will be chatting with Chris Murray of the Nevada Sports Net shortly at the bottom of the hour. But wanted to start talking about the Oregon offense versus the Nevada defense. The Nevada defense, which runs a 3-3-5 stack, which is something that you just don't see very much anymore in college football. You definitely don't see it in the NFL. I mean, that just stop. But you do see it occasionally in the college game. It certainly can work in the Mountain West. You don't see it in the major conferences, just simply, quite honestly, folks, because you need to have more size up front. You just do. And I understand the back end of it with the 5 and the defensive backs, but the 3-3 stack is That's a tough one to pull off in the.
I actually ran that
league.
defense in high school.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I say, you see it on occasion, but let's put it this way: the last guy who tried to run this in a major conference was Rich Rodriguez, and it didn't go so well in a couple of spots. So, so they run it, but nevertheless, it is a different scheme. So when you're talking about blocking schemes and assignments and whatnot, it just gets a little bit different because it's not something that you see very often. So for Oregon, that's a challenge, just in the sense that you have to know. Assignment-wise, blocking assignment-wise especially, it's just a little bit of a different look. That said, when Oregon is in a 7-man protect, oh boy, could that be quite a potential advantage by way of size, because you're talking about 3 men on the front, 3 linebackers, and a defensive back against 5 offensive linemen and 2 tight ends. That could be a whole lot of size advantage for Oregon there. Whole lot.
So explain the 7-man protect for those that don't understand.
So you have your standard 5-man. That would be your offensive line. Your 6-man would be either a tight end, generally speaking, or fullback if you run such an offense, or H-back if that's your cup of tea. 7-man, obviously just adding one more. So you would have either 2 tight ends in 21 or 22 personnel with 1 back or 2 backs, generally 1. Or you would have 1 tight end, like I say, and an H-back or fullback. Now, that's not something that Oregon really relies on. It's really just multiple tight ends. So in a 7-man protect, which they did at times against Auburn due to its size up front, against Nevada, you could have, as I say, if you got 7-man protection and obviously protecting Herbert, that's 8. If there's a back, that's 9. So you're only talking about a 2-wide receiver set, 1 back with Verdell or Dye, and then a whole lot of big bodies looking to pave the way or protect for passing purposes. Well, again, against a 3-3-5, you're just talking about a gross size, discrepancy between the two teams. That's with a 7-man. Even with a 6-man, quite honestly, you're still giving a pretty solid advantage. Because the hope in a 6-man protect against a 3-3-5 is that the defensive back, if they're charging in on a blitz, is that the hope being that the running back can handle a defensive back. You're hoping that they get matched up with the defensive back and they don't do something crazy and exotic like a DB taking on a tackle so that they can free up an interior defensive lineman to try and get free, is your hope. Your hope. Doesn't always happen that way, but that's the hope. So, again, the 3-3-5, it's a different kind of matchup. That's one scheme to keep, certainly a storyline to keep an eye on, just by way of how the Ducks are performing. Obviously, we're talking about the gross talent of the teams. There's a reason why there's a 24-point line here, folks. So let's not.
Oh, it's up to 24?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It opened at 21.5.
Yeah. So it's sitting at 3 touchdowns for a reason here. But as a whole, 3-3-5, something just to keep an eye on. One of those 3 in the middle being Gabe Sewell, older brother of Penei Sewell. It will be a bit of a family feud out there, to say the least, because he is usually the linebacker lined up on the side going up against the left tackle. So there will be times that the brothers will be exchanging pleasantries, to say the least. And you're talking about
noogies,
rather large human beings. You've got a 320-plus pound offensive tackle and a 240-pound linebacker. And, yes, there is going to be quite the exchange when they lock horns on occasion throughout the game. If Penei ever gets downfield trying to block on the second level, that could certainly be a rather daunting task when you're going up against your brother, who admittedly he's the bigger brother, but he is the smaller brother in raw size.
Right.
So giving up a considerable amount of height and weight to Penei. And, yes, their father has spoken to several media outlets this week and talking about that matchup and talking about how, look, all he is focusing on is just that the two of them get through it and get through it healthy and move on, because who wins and who loses is the least of his concern when they're going to be going out there, because that has got to be, needless to say, a position that few parents would envy. On one hand, there's a lot of pride that they have both made it to this point, and certainly that they have another son who used to be at Nevada, now elsewhere within the FBS, and now a fourth son who is looking to play at a major college level. Hey, a lot of pride there, but at the same time, when two of them are going at each other, that is definitely a position that no parent wants to necessarily be in for very long. So that being one of the storylines for sure between the Oregon offense and Nevada defense. And we will expound upon that a little bit further with our next guest, Chris Murray of the Nevada Sports Net. We'll be chatting with him coming up. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. And we now welcome on the Davis Roofing Hotline, Chris Murray of Nevada Sportsnet. You can follow him on Twitter at MurrayNSN. Chris, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into it with this Saturday's matchup. Let's start going backwards a little bit to last week. Carson Strong led quite the comeback against Purdue. Tell us a little bit about Nevada's quarterback. Who is this guy? Who is this redshirt freshman who managed to step up on that stage and be able to lead this offense to a big comeback over Purdue?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't highly recruited. I mean, Nevada was the only FBS school to give him an offer and really wasn't getting a ton of interest even after his junior season. So after his junior year, he was named the MVP of his league, both in football and in basketball, but wasn't really getting a lot of love. Actually ended up going to a 7-on-7 tryout over in the Bay Area. I lived about a half hour away from there, and the team was coached by Maurice Jones-Drew, the former NFL running back, and he was one of more than a dozen quarterbacks in the camp. They were only taking 2 quarterbacks for the team. He didn't think he had any shot at making it. Actually, there's a player on Oregon who was on that 7-on-7 team. But Maurice Jones-Drew came up to him and said, what are your offers? Where are you going to school? And he's like, well, my only interest right now is Southern Oregon, and they haven't offered me yet. And they were like, that's crazy. You're a Division I quarterback. So I think that gave him a lot of belief that he could go and do it. His quarterback coach on that 7-on-7 team was Matt Gutierrez, the backup to Tom Brady. During the 2008 season when the Patriots went undefeated. Kind of grew a lot confidence-wise from that. He actually missed his senior season of high school because of knee surgery, so never really played again after that 7-on-7 camp at the high school ranks. But Nevada did offer him probably 2 or 3 months after he made that 7-on-7 team, and were impressed with what they saw. They stuck with him. He stuck with them, and was able to win the job. Because he was really good in fall camp, and the fifth-year senior who kind of entered with the number 1 spot on the depth chart, broke his hand in the second practice by hitting it on a helmet. So was able to beat out that guy, beat out Malik Henry, who many people know from the Last Chance U documentary, a 4-star recruit who began his career at Florida State. So, he's a really talented kid. I mean, he's 6'4". He's a good athlete, as we noted, as a basketball player. Probably isn't going to burn you with his legs, but can get yards with his legs. Has an NFL-level arm. I mean, the arm strength is certainly there. And then showed a ton of poise and good leadership in the comeback against Purdue. I mean, that was Nevada's second largest comeback in the last 22 years. So, it come from 17 down in the second half against a Big Ten team and put Nevada in position to win that game by scoring 10 points in the final minute. I think the team is really excited to have him and see what he can accomplish the next 4 years here at Nevada.
Would you chalk this up, Chris, to a little bit of the injury and that being why he wasn't as heralded, or is this to the idea and premise that, man, everybody spends so much time trying to evaluate quarterbacks and sometimes one just kind of slips through? Because on build, you're right. I mean, 6'4", 220. I don't know how in the world, based on what I saw watching the game Friday night, I don't know what people were watching that made them think at the high school level. Now, look, I'm not looking at his high school tape right now from his junior year, but, I mean, unless he had a growth spurt when he was 16, I'm not sure what exactly was very unappealing about the young man.
Yeah, I mean, you watch the 7-on-7 tape, too, and he was making all of the throws. I do think the injury hurt him. So he grew up in Vacaville, California. That's not too far away from Nevada. It's about 2.5 hours away from Nevada outside of Sacramento. It's not a highly recruited area. His parents didn't really know how the system worked as far as getting him into certain camps and 7-on-7 teams and things like that. I mean, he literally went to Maurice Jones-Drew's team tryout because a couple of his friends were going, and he just figured he would tag along. So I think not knowing how to play the system hurt him, but certainly the losing of the senior season knocked down the interest and the number of scholarships he would have gotten. But it's an inexact science. I mean, the last quarterback well-known at Nevada who only had 1 scholarship offer coming out of high school was Colin Kaepernick, and he turned out to be a pretty good quarterback as well. So, he was also a guy who was 6'5", and had good athleticism and the arm strength and all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, sometimes you just fall through the cracks, and I think the location he played at, just not getting in front of the right eyes. But as soon as he came to Nevada, and he's actually able to enroll early like most quarterbacks do, that was not the original plan because he was a good basketball player. He was going to, stick it out through his high school career and not enroll early in the spring. Coming early in the spring, I think, has really helped him. He's had 2 spring camps under his belt, 2 fall camps under his belt. So while he's a redshirt freshman, of Nevada's healthy quarterbacks, he's actually the most experienced and most tenured with the Wolfpack. So, the combination of that and just the release, it's a very natural release. I mean, Chris Ault, who's a pretty well-known coach in this area, he's in the College Football Hall of Fame and, has coached Nevada for 29 years, is around the program a lot and goes to a lot of practices. And even last year, I mean, he said this kid is somebody that we haven't seen in a long, long time, just as far as his natural throwing ability at a young age. I mean, better than even Colin Kaepernick was as a thrower when Colin was a freshman at Nevada. So he was the first freshman to start a season opener for Nevada since 1998, and nothing that he did last Friday against Purdue, kind of tamped down the expectations for him. I think, the community is really behind this kid now, and I think he'll be able to play through his mistakes now. I think, Jay Norvell in his first year kind of made a couple of quarterback decisions early on in the season and went with 3 different quarterbacks in the first 5 or 6 games. I think Carson, even if he struggles against Oregon, they're going to let him play through it, even though they have some other talented quarterbacks in the room.
And you mentioned the Oregon player who was on his 7-on-7 team, and that being safety Javon Holland. And Holland spoke about that a bit earlier in the week, talking about, yes, that they are friends, and he's certainly looking forward to seeing him go out there and play. And it's not going to bring anything new to the game necessarily, but that it's, yes, we talked about the Sewell brother dynamic, but that's another added dynamic to this is that, yes, Javon played with him. Javon actually played on offense with him as well as defense in that. We're chatting with Chris Murley of Nevada Sportsnet. Chris, tell us a little bit about the running back, Toa. He was bottled up pretty dang good by Andy Avalos in Boise State last year, just 16 yards on 9 carries. How did that happen? How did that go down? And how can Nevada try to do better against this Oregon defense?
Yeah, I mean, Toa, he's a really good running back. I mean, he was a 4-star kid coming out of high school. Nevada does not get 4-star kids in football, but there was a family tie there. So his older brother, Vi Tawa, was a historic running back in Nevada. He was Colin Kaepernick's running back in that 2010 season when Nevada finished 11th in the nation. In 2009, he was one of 3 players on Nevada's rush for 1,000 yards. It's the only time in the history of the NCAA where 3 different players have hit 1,000 yards in a single season. So Vi, when Norvell got the job, Vi was in the parking lot the next morning, standing in the rain, 6 o'clock outside the football offices, waiting for Jay to pull up and asking for a job. And he basically gave him like a special teams kind of quality control coach job. He just wanted to keep, an alum who wanted a position in the fold. And, I think that really helped get Toa to campus. And then this year, Vi gets elevated to running backs coach when Nevada's running back coach left for Mississippi for a different job. So it's actually the older brother coaching the younger brother, which is kind of a cool dynamic for the Wolfpack. But in that game, Nevada's offensive line was just a little bit overwhelmed. I mean, Toa is a really good running back. He gets usually the maximum number of yards you can get out of every single run. It's very hard to take him down on first impact. He's a very strong player. He has good speed, very determined, good instincts. You could see against Purdue when he was in the game versus when Nevada's other running backs were in the game, it was just a different ability to get yards after contact and get to the second level. So, while Boise State did do a really good job of shutting him down last year, I think it was more on the offensive line. And that's the big question mark for me for Nevada coming into this game. Nevada's offensive line is still pretty young. The 2 tackles started last year. The left tackle, Jake Nelson, is a really good tackle. But the 3 interior linemen are all first-time starters entering this season. So you have a center who was a walk-on, a local kid. And then you have 2 guards. One of them was a defensive end when he came to Nevada last year. The other one was a tight end when he came to Nevada. So the interior of the line has some question marks for me. And Purdue, to me, didn't do a very good job of trying to expose those question marks. They did not blitz a lot against a redshirt freshman quarterback making his first college start, and an interior line that's not very experienced. And I do wonder if Oregon is a little bit more aggressive in trying to force the issue and trying to create them, putting them into some more pressure situations. Nevada did not have a turnover against Purdue, and I think that was a huge part of why they won. They were +5 in the turnover margin They avoided mistakes because Purdue didn't really force the issue. So I think as long as the offensive line can give Toa a little bit of a hole, he's going to get yards. I mean, he's somebody who they used a lot in the passing game actually against Purdue. I mean, 8 catches against Purdue, that's a career high. So he got his 125 yards and both in the pass game and in the run game, and they'll probably do a little bit more of that against Oregon. He might not be super successful running the ball, but I do think that they're going to try and get the ball into his hands a little bit more in the pass game than we saw last season.
Yeah, I could definitely see Andy Avalos being just a wee bit more aggressive than Purdue.
Yeah.
Granted, he has a lot more to work with, but Purdue's defense is awful. They're just plain terrible. So, I mean, I had a chance to watch them in the bowl game because I had to care because they were playing Auburn, and that was the season opener out here. But, yeah, Purdue's defense stinks. So that kind of goes without saying. Tell us a little bit about the Nevada secondary. They did a particularly good job as the game went on against Rondale Moore, one of the better wide receivers in the country. Oregon may or may not, depending if Juwan Johnson plays or not, have a player of that ilk. But who is kind of responsible for helping shut down Rondale Moore as the game kind of wore on, and who does this Oregon offense and wide receiver core have to worry about by way of coverage?
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Brown is the best cornerback on the team. It's the guy who had 2 interceptions against Purdue. One was kind of thrown to him. The other one, very athletic play off a tipped ball. That was the one that came with about 40 seconds left. Purdue had the ball, game tied, trying to drive for the game-winning field goal. They get the interception, and they're able to flip it, and Nevada gets the game-winning field goal. But he's a guy who's a little bit unheralded. He's never made an all-conference team, but you look at Pro Football Focus's advanced metrics, he was the top-rated cornerback returning from last year in the Mountain West, and he showed why against Purdue. I mean, he was terrific. I believe the passer rating on passes against him against Purdue was 14. I think that ranked somewhere in the top 10 in the nation. So he's really, really good. The rest of the secondary is a pretty big question mark. I mean, you're talking about 3 safeties. Nevada runs a 3-3-5. 3 safeties who didn't have really any experience coming into the season. You're talking about a bunch of guys who came to Nevada as offensive players who were moved to defense. I mean, one of them started at quarterback as a true freshman for Nevada, is now playing safety. Tyson Williams is the one who I think is the best of the safety players right now. He actually came to Nevada as a slot receiver out of Alabama. A smaller kid, 5'9", but he had 12 tackles against Purdue. He's a really good player, a guy who doesn't mind throwing his body around, a very athletic player. But the secondary is a huge question mark, especially when you're going up to against a quarterback of this caliber at Oregon. They did have the interceptions. They did create some turnovers, but they also gave up the 4th most passing yards of any team in the nation against Purdue. And, Rondale Moore, they did not do a good job in the first 2 drives. Rondale Moore was getting his hand on basically every ball. They were going to him in a variety of ways. They were using him in the run game. And I think part of it is Purdue did not do a good job scheme-wise in the second half and getting him the ball. And Nevada just did a better job of getting closer to the line and not giving him any space. They were giving him a ton of space in the first couple of series, and he was doing a lot of damage. But they did make adjustments, and they have a really good defensive coordinator. I mean, Jeff Castile is a guy who was at West Virginia when Rich Rod was there. Consistently had top 25 defenses in the nation. He did not go with Rich Rod to Michigan. It's probably one of the reasons that he didn't have a lot of success there. He eventually did go to Arizona with Rich Rod in his 3rd season at Nevada. So from a coaching perspective, Jeff Castile is a very good coach, and he's going to scheme it up as best as possible. But I do think this is the biggest advantage for Oregon. Even though they're banged up with the wide receivers, the secondary with the Wolfpack is probably the biggest question mark on the team. Daniel Brown is really good, but outside of that, they don't have a lot of proven guys.
Chris, I know that ultimately it's about winning, but when it's a 3-touchdown spread, let's get past that for a second. How do you think Nevada defines success in this game?
I think it's a similar formula to Purdue. I mean, they need to win the turnover battle lopsidedly. They need to do really well in special teams. Nevada has not been great at special teams over the years, but they played an elite game at special teams against Purdue. They basically averaged almost 50 yards per punt. Now, Carson Strong had 4 of those punts. I think his average was 45 yards per punt, so they did a lot of pooch punt situations. Their kicker, who was kind of the hero of the game, Brandon Talton, a true freshman walk-on, who nobody even knew was starting entering the game, ends up having a 56-yard field goal to win the game. Also had an extra point to tie the game. It was a 35-yard extra point because of an excessive celebration. He also had a 34-yard field goal where the holder wasn't even on the field when he took the field, and he had to wave him over. They got the snap off. Actually, it was like a 10-yard snap rather than the usual 7, and he drills that one. And then they did pretty good in the return game as well. So they need to win the turnover battle. They need to do a really good job in special teams, make a couple impact plays there. And I think what they need to do is do well enough with the run defense that they try and make Oregon one-dimensional with a clearly banged-up wide receiver core. That's the big question mark to me. I mean, Oregon's offensive line is obviously huge and very veteran, but Nevada has been really good against the run. When Jay Norvell took over, Nevada had the worst run defense in the nation, and then last year they ranked in the top 30 in the nation. Now, Purdue didn't have this dynamic rushing attack against Nevada, but Nevada did a really good job holding up against a larger Big Ten offensive line and really limiting what Purdue could do on the ground. So if they can make them one-dimensional, get a couple turnovers, make some big plays with special team, maybe they at least put some pressure on Oregon into the fourth quarter and throw some doubt into their mind. I think what they have to do is not do what they did in 2011. So a very similar situation where Oregon starts the season in Arlington against an SEC school. Mm-hmm. In 2011, it's a loss to LSU. This year, it's a loss to Auburn. And then week 2, Nevada comes to Eugene, and Nevada got blown out in that game, 69-20. They just got off to a horrible start. I think they were down 35-0, early in the second quarter. And Nevada can't allow that to happen. They have to at least, play well enough in the first quarter to where they put some pressure and some doubt in Oregon's mind. I don't know if they can do that. I mean, I think the personnel is just so different on these two teams. But if there's a path to doing it, it's very similar to what they did at Purdue, and at least, be close in the fourth quarter. So if a couple of breaks go their way, they might have a chance to win the game.
Last two things for you, Chris. Jay Norvell's obviously had quite the quick success. How many games do you think he has to win until he becomes the hot name, the next Matt Wells, the next guy out of the Mountain West who manages to find his way up into a Power 5 job? I know that's not what Nevada people want to hear, but that's the reality of the situation. How many games does he have to win this year? Because winning 8 back-to-back or winning 8 and 9 in those leagues, you don't do that very long before you move on. So if he is to do that, what's the number? Is it 8 again? Is it 9? Is it 10? What's it going to take for Jay Norvell to be that hot name we hear out of the Mountain West?
Yeah, I think it's winning the West Division. I mean, the West Division is wide open this year. Fresno State has won it the last 2 years. I think if they can get into a Mountain West championship game, if they do that, they're probably going to be in the 9-win region. Then he has a chance of getting looks from more prestigious schools. I mean, obviously, this guy has a tremendous resume. I mean, he coached in the NFL. He's coached in Super Bowl. He coached as a wide receiver coach. He coached Jerry Rice, Tim Brown, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne. He's been at UCLA, he's been at Oklahoma, he's been at Texas, he's been at Nebraska, he's been at these really big-name schools, and nobody ever gave him the chance. I mean, he did a ton of interviews, and I think he was always kind of maybe, in his mind, started to believe, well, am I just kind of the token interview to, check the box of I did speak with a minority. Nevada took the risk on him, and he's only getting paid $500,000 a year. Now, that's really low by Mountain West standards, let alone Power 5 standards. So, I think he has enough ties. He's young enough. He's innovative enough with his offense that, if he goes out there and he wins 9 games and he gets to a Mountain West championship game, maybe that intrigue percolates enough to where he gets an offer from another school, because it's not like he's pigeonholed into one area, because he has coached all over the nation. I do think Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12 schools could all be interested in him. He would interview super well. He's a really good person, likable person, and has the resume to back it up. And Nevada fans have been through this before. I mean, they just lost Eric Musselman to Arkansas in basketball, and they were sweating that out for multiple years. I don't think the fan base is quite as worried, but if he goes out there and he wins 9 games, 10 games, I as an athletic director at a Power 5 school, certainly want to talk to him and see if he's the right fit for my school.
Last thing, Chris, and we've been chatting with Chris Murray of Nevada Sportsnet. Again, follow him on Twitter at MurrayNSN. How do you see this one playing out, and do you have a score prediction for us?
Yeah, I just actually put my prediction up. I believe I went 42-21 Oregon. I think I may have switched them. I don't went 45 to 22 Oregon. I do think Oregon wins. I would pick Nevada to cover. I just don't know how the secondary slows down Oregon's offense. And that would be the biggest concern for me from Nevada's perspective is how do you get enough stops to give your offense a chance to keep you in this game? I think this is probably the best quarterback, offensive line, and secondary Nevada's going to see all season. It's the most speed they're going to see on the field all season. I do think they come in with some confidence based on how that Purdue game went, but it's a different atmosphere. I mean, they have not played in front of a crowd like they're going to see on Saturday for multiple years. The biggest crowd they played in front of last year was at Vanderbilt, and although that's an SEC school, they're not packing the stands there. So, getting off to a fast start, I think is huge. I mean, Nevada went 3 and out against Purdue and was able to claw their way back into the game I don't think they can get off to a slow start like they did against the Boilermakers and survive. So I just don't have enough faith in the Nevada offense and its secondary in particular to believe that they can keep it super, super close. But I do think that they will keep it within the 24-point line that I've seen, come out today.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Chris.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. Some news and notes from around the college football world over the last 24 hours or so. New Mexico's Bob Davie will not be traveling with the team to what was really a homecoming game of sorts and reunion of sorts at Notre Dame on September the 14th. They have already come out and announced that. Saga Tuatele, the New Mexico offensive line coach and run game coordinator, will serve as the team's acting head coach after Davie had that rather serious health issue that required him to be hospitalized after last week's game. He, again, will not be traveling to the game against Notre Dame on the 14th, which, quite frankly, I think was being done in part because of Bob Davie. So that should tell you just the level of seriousness. Though the school put out a statement from Davie saying that he certainly felt that with rest and recovery that he should be able to make a full recovery. But nevertheless, quite a disappointing situation, and certainly send the best to Bob Davie. Northwestern quarterback T.J. Green, the son of Trent Green, out for the season after a foot surgery due to an injury he suffered during the season opener. Georgia right tackle Isaiah Wilson, who is a All-American caliber player, could be out for 3 to 4 weeks due to an injury he incurred. 2 people were arrested for flying a drone over the Big House in Ann Arbor late in Michigan's game against Middle Tennessee. The police said that they were not students and that the charges they are facing are for misdemeanor. It's a misdemeanor charge involving a university ordinance and Federal Aviation Administration violations. The police did not release the names of the 2 individuals and said in an email that both were released pending the authorization of warrants. Kind of a bizarre story that I'm sure there's a little bit more to than meets the eye, but nevertheless, a little odd that 2 people were not only flying drones over the stadium in the first place, because for all you know, they were just looking to take pictures, but that they were arrested for doing so. Seems a little bit excessive, but I know that basically every stadium in the country has a no-fly on game days, except for obviously flyovers, which you can understand where the exception comes in that case. Elsewhere, LeBron James issuing support for the Fair Pay to Play Act in the state of California that regarding allowing college athletes to profit from their name, image, and likeness. LeBron issuing some statements via Twitter today in support of that bill's initiative. That's your news and notes from around the college football world. The Bears and Packers about to kick off in a few minutes.
This is the James Crepea Show.
We've got a blind date with destiny.
And it looks like she's ordered the lobster.
Oregonian columnist James Crepea.
I had some crackpot dynamite reporter at the first press conference ask me how in the heck we're going to possibly throw the ball when they keep a lid on their covers and who's the best pass rusher you've ever played against.
We're not the favorites. We're the other guys.
KORE 1050 and 95.7, Fox Sports Eugene. Here is the James Crepea Show, presented by Dairy Mart.
For those who have players in their fantasy teams with the Bears and Packers, looking to quickly set and finalize your fantasy lineups for those players, here are the inactives for tonight's game, which is about 15-20 minutes away from kicking off the NFL season. For the Packers, here are the inactives: wide receiver Darius Shepard, running back Dexter Williams, cornerback Kadar Hallman, linebacker Oren Brooks. That's a big one. Not that many people necessarily have defenses on an individual basis, but if you have the Packers defense, that's certainly a blow. Ty Summers will be starting at inside linebacker in place of Oren Brooks for the Packers. A couple of offensive linemen, Cole Madison and Alex Light, and defensive lineman Kingsley Kiki, who is an all-SEC player in college, young guy. He is also inactive for the Packers. For the Bears, defensive back Kevin Tolliver, running back Kerith White Jr., linebacker Josh Woods, O-lineman Rashad Coward, D-lineman Abdullah Anderson, tight end Trey Burton, that's a big one, Now, a lot of people certainly look to have him on their fantasy team, and wide receiver Riley Ridley, another big one. So those are the two big inactives for the Bears, Trey Burton, Riley Ridley, for those who have a vested interest by way of fantasy or want to try and get in some late wagers out there for the NFL season opener, kicking off again on NBC at roughly 5:20 Pacific time. Going back to the matchup of Saturday between Oregon and Nevada, and finishing up the discussion we had started last hour regarding the Oregon offense and Nevada defense. One rather amusing thing that came out of Jay Norvell's press conference earlier this week was Jay, in going over the Oregon offense in particular, was just rattling off, players and et cetera, et cetera. And look, I mean, it happens, man. At a press conference, you're just rattling off a roster. It's the other team. Coaches look more at numbers, I assure you. They really look more at numbers. And if they're not in the league, they really don't pay that much attention to the names of the opposing players. But it was rather amusing that Jay Norvell called Justin Herbert Justin Hebert.
Oh.
That was pretty good, I got to say. I would have put it in the They Said It column in various pieces that we do for the Oregonian and Oregon Live, but trying to translate that in the written word is a little bit harder.
Bobby Hebert has not played in 30 years, people.
So, and the Herberts are not French-Canadian.
No.
So, yes, it is Herbert, not Hebert, but according to Jay Norvell, Justin Hebert has quite the arm. So, lo and behold. Also, he got Justin momentarily confused when talking about the defense, and he's rattling off the cornerbacks. Needless to say, Diamondor Lenoir's chance stood no chance. That name stood no chance with Jay Norvell. Let's just get past that one. But he got, because he was focused on Justin, he called Thomas Graham Justin Graham. So that one also rather amusing. So if anybody wants to turn into bulletin board material, feel free. But again, Jay Norvell's just going through the personnel on the other team. He's not studying it by way of the names. He's really just focusing on the numbers for scheme purposes. But yes, those were just two particular moments that stood out, because it was like, that guy, that potential number one pick in the NFL draft. What's his last name?
Fred.
If this coaching thing doesn't work out, Jay Norvell could end up being the next commissioner of the NFL with how well he pronounces the names on draft day. So, to the Oregon defense against the Nevada offense, and we were chatting about that obviously with Chris Murray from Nevada Sportsnet in the last hour. Yes, the Nevada offense runs a pretty unusual mix of scheme in that you have what Jay Norvell would even characterize as some aspects of their run game are similar stylistically to Auburn, believe it or not. It's just a little different. It's a little unusual. So you have that mixed with air raid style passing. That's what makes it an unusual mix, in that these are two very different philosophies that he's marrying together into an offense, because how you try to compose your roster to fit them is very different. It's not that when you go about recruiting and how you try to formulate body types and whatnot, it's just not that simple to say. Like an air raid, obviously, plenty of people have seen over the years that, for instance, Mike Leach doesn't always have the biggest offensive lineman. Doesn't always. Now, that's changed over the years. That's why I say it's not always the case. But he doesn't always have the biggest lineman. Generally, they're a little bit leaner. Their splits are a lot wider on the offensive line. When he was now at Washington State or at Texas Tech, you saw it. Because of that, he could afford to have them be a little bit more nimble and, light of foot. Now he has had some bigger guys. Again, Andre Dillard being an exception, so I don't want anybody thinking that I said that he was small. But when you're trying to marry that kind of philosophy with a philosophy that also does a lot of power and inside zone runs that Norvell even compares to something that Auburn does, those are two very different things. Those are very, very different things. A lot of the basis of Auburn's runs are, yes, power and inside zone, but the basis from it, stylistically, comes from the Delaware wing T, which is
old
very nearly
school.
Which is very nearly the triple option. So to say that you're trying to marry that concept with air raid I mean, it's awfully difficult in offense to go polar opposite. That is almost polar opposite. And Norvell marries these two together to make Nevada's offense. And Mario Cristobal had talked about how that is just a challenge to face because, yeah, the keys you're reading, everything about it is just, it's different. You've got it's almost like you've got two dueling and different philosophies on the same team because it is two very, very different looking things. So that's the challenge for Oregon's defense, stylistically speaking. Again, we're not talking about talent and raw size, strength, and grit. We understand that the teams are very different. But what is the challenge in playing a team like Nevada is, yeah, on one hand, you did play Auburn. They did have certain things in the run game. On the other hand, you played a team like Auburn who did not run anything like an air raid and really didn't run very many 4 and 5 wide receiver sets at you at all. Was trying to protect for Bo Nix as much as possible. So to now potentially face not just 4 wide receiver sets, but 4 wide receiver sets where they have guys who are enormous at wide receiver. They have some humongous wide receivers on this team by way of just sheer raw height. So credit to Nevada for that, in that, yeah, they really have recruited to fit the bill by way of size. It's rather amusing. If you look at their depth chart, one in particular stands out because he's from right up the road. In Clackamas, you've got Colt Turner is a rather large human being. He is listed at 6'6", 225. Now, he's a backup at one of their receiver spots, but their other outside receivers, 6'4", 215, 6'1", 195, 6'2", 195. Those are your 4 outside receivers. Needless to say, Auburn. Oh, my God. I'm done talking about them.
Fired.
I'm done talking about it. Stop it. Oregon's corners have a major size disadvantage. Now, yes, they may have the speed advantage and all that, but the size part, yeah, they're going to be challenged vertically speaking for some jump balls here. So that being part. Now, the inside guys, that's where they use the much smaller, more nimble route runners. So you're looking at guys at 5'9", 190, 5'9", 185. Yeah, so Caleb Fossum in particular being one guy in the slot. So one of the questions that I have heading into this weekend is, how does Verone McKinley, the third, respond after that game-winning play at the end of the Auburn game? How does he respond? Well, he was matched up with Seth Williams. We've chronicled already. He was giving up 5 inches and 25 pounds against these interior slot receivers for Nevada. That will not be the case. McKinley will be the bigger guy because he's standing at 5'10", and these guys are 5'9" or 5'8". That's, generally speaking, a bit more of what you see in the slot. So that will probably bode well for him, but how does he respond in particular? How does the Oregon secondary on the outside handle those bigger bodies? Because needless to say, hey, if you want to talk about by overall raw talent, certainly we still understand it's a Mountain West team. However, it's a pretty good Mountain West team. And when this team has to play one of the bigger receiver cores in the Pac-12 only a couple of weeks from now, this should be your indicator of, at least by way of size, how they go about trying to defend against the bigger bodies. Because when they have to play Stanford in a couple of weeks, that's going to be the big question. And the first thing that many of those players will say is, well, 2 weeks ago we faced that Nevada team, and they had some pretty big bodies. So that will be the thing to pay attention to when Nevada is on offense. Also expect a little bit more by way of pass rush this week. Obviously, Oregon's defense certainly got pressure, really had Bo Nix on the move quite a bit. But I expect a little bit more by way of pass rush. Not that I'm expecting Andy Avalos to start blitzing like crazy. That's not what I'm saying. I expect it a little bit more because, like we spoke about in our interaction with Cole Kublik, he had mentioned that, and when talking about Kayvon Thibodeau and saying, well, Thibodeau only had 1 tackle and he was credited with a hurry, but didn't have a ton of snaps, but he was pretty active. Why? What did you see? Why or why not? Did he not have more production? And some of that being by design, by what Auburn was doing, and some of that being by inherently that because of the way they were blocking, that it really didn't lend itself very much to a lot by way of pass rush. Not to say that Nevada is going to all of a sudden start doing a ton of things that allow for pass rush to happen, but when they are in more air raid, And let's face it, if this game gets well in hand and Nevada has to pass and get into that part of their offense, then, yeah, I would expect there to be some more opportunities. I would expect for there to be more opportunities in second and long, third and long potential situations where that defensive line can pin their ears back and Nevada has to pass, and they're going out there with 4 wide receiver sets, and the D-line knows it, and they're bringing the house. And they're looking to go right after the quarterback. We expect to see a little bit more of that this week than maybe you saw last week, just again by the way of the schemes, and obviously that this game could potentially, and if you're a Ducks fan, hopefully, very much may not be as competitive for as long. Speaking of Ducks fans, if you do not have tickets yet for this weekend's game, we will be giving away a pair of tickets shortly, momentarily, here on the 5 o'clock hour. Keep listening. It will happen very soon. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. And if you have been listening and you have been hearing us say we will be giving away a pair of tickets, yes, now is the time. We will take the 5th caller in the Davis Roofing Hotline at 541-343-KORE. That's 541-343-5673. If you want a pair of tickets to Saturday's game between the Ducks and the Wolfpack, give us a call. We're taking the 5th caller. You get the pair of tickets, again, at 541-343-5673. Get on it now because we're already getting some, and Intern Adam is on the horn, so jump at it. If you want a pair of tickets to this weekend's game, 541-343-5673. Bears and Packers kicking off the NFL season momentarily on NBC. NBC, as you heard during the break, getting that update from Drew Rosenhaus, Antonio Brown's agent. He's at Soldier Field tonight for the start of the NFL season, giving you that update that he believes that the relationship can still be salvaged between Antonio Brown and the Raiders. What do you expect Drew Rosenhaus to say? Is he going to come out and say, yeah, well, you know, now that you mention it, no, I don't think we can recover this. Of course he's going to say that, especially on national television. But that, if you are waiting, as many of you have been, for the start of the NFL season, today is your day.
This is your day.
It is not St. Patty's Day.
It's not St. Patty's Day.
It's
That's
not.
a different day
That's
entirely.
Completely different. It's not
This
Columbus
is your
Day.
day.
This is your day. This is your day. You are moments away from the start of the NFL season on NBC. Certainly, it's like a national holiday, Steve. In my opinion, I think it is a national holiday. The start of the NFL season.
We've got a lot of national holidays then, if that's the case.
I think this one is almost like a national holiday. Almost. For the amount of interest in this league, it is huge. I think opening day in baseball carries it. It's just different. It is. There's a difference between the start of the baseball season in the spring. It's like the unofficial start of spring for certainly, and obviously it can look god-awful if it's snowing in some of the stadiums in the Midwest at that time of year. But nevertheless, it's like the unofficial start of spring. It's the start of a new season. Hope and optimism, etc., abound. But with the NFL season and the amount of interest in the NFL and in football in this country, I think the start of the NFL season is holiday-like.
I don't know. I think last week with the start of college was pretty
don't get me wrong.
holiday-like.
Hey, in my line of work in particular, yes, the college season always carries a bit more for me. But I'm talking about in the raw numbers of the masses nationally. Because you got to remember, look, as big as college is obviously in this market and obviously throughout the SEC where there's not a lot of pro teams and in parts of the Big Ten, there's a significant part of this country, especially in the major markets where the NFL teams are, where, hey, this is it. This is their biggest thing. I can assure you that in Philadelphia, even though they have the Big Five schools, let me tell you, they could care less about the college game, okay? I can assure you that if you ask anybody in Philadelphia, who is the starting quarterback for the Eagles versus who is the starting quarterback for the Temple Owls, and this is not a knock on whoever that might be for the Owls this season, they're going to tell you a lot more about the Eagles.
Okay, but we're in Eugene.
Right.
I mean, we're not in Seattle. We're not, you know.
So I understand that. So I'm saying it is a big day in the sports realm. And the college fan is still I would hope, a appreciative fan of the NFL. They may not have to be a fan of the Packers or the Bears, and that's fine. But it's a big day. That's all. I'm just saying. It's a big day. So
this is your day.
It is your day. If you are a big NFL fan, if you are a fantasy fan, all those things, it's a big day. Elsewhere in the kind of pro-ish, yeah, it's pro. It's pro. But in baseball, this was a story that stood out to me today that drew just kind of fascinating / interesting / kind of mix of everything. Home runs are, everybody's talking about how much it's up in the Major League Baseball realm, and that it'll crack the Major League record for home runs in a season. They're well on that way. It is way, way up in AAA as well. Way up. 58% increase.
What?
Year over year. According to the organization that governs minor league baseball, 5,752 home runs were hit in the International and Pacific Coast Leagues. That is up from 3,652 last year.
Balls juiced.
2,100 more home runs were hit in AAA baseball this year compared to the prior year. Rawlings provides the baseballs for the majors and the minors. The Major League ball is manufactured in Costa Rica. The minor league balls are made in China. Okay? The difference is that this year, AAA used the Costa Rican-made balls, whereas other levels still used the China-made Rawlings baseballs. And herein lies the difference. So you've heard all year in Major League Baseball about pitchers telling you that they think there's something different about the ball and that they think it's juiced in some way and et cetera. Well, herein lies more data supporting that. So, again, big league hitters are on pace to break the single-season home run record in the majors next week with over 2 weeks remaining in the season. Now, elsewhere at other levels of baseball, just to show you the comparisons, there was a drop in home runs in 9 of the 14 leagues in AA, where the Chinese manufactured baseballs were used. So there was drops. Now, some, how much of a drop or whatever. The AP has the story. You can look into the numbers. It's on ESPN's website, but it's an AP story. You can see it out there. I hope most organizations would post it, frankly, because it is rather fascinating. In the Northwest League, right here in Eugene, there was a 19% drop in home runs year over year. Now, what does that equate to, you might ask? And here's the difference, because you're talking about the shortened season of A-ball. That is 348 home runs in the league compared to 432. So it's a significant drop, numbers and percentage-wise. But when you're talking about at the AAA level where there's 5,750 compared to here, you're talking about less than 400, or in the case of last year, 432. That's the difference in the number of home runs in the Northwest League this year. That could literally be the difference of, 2 or 3 really potent power hitters leaving the league, being called up, or what have you. So some of that can be equated a little bit more to just talent leaving the league and things like that at the minor league level. But when you get to the AAA level, to see that kind of disparity, where they start using, as they say, the balls that were made by Rawlings in Costa Rica compared to the baseballs that were made in China, it carries a lot of weight into the conversation that you're having in Major League Baseball this year about, is this ball just inherently different? Is it juiced in some way? What is so different about it? And believe me, there is going to be a lot talked about and expounded upon in the offseason. You've already heard it during the season, but in the offseason about what is going on with the Rawlings baseballs, because the major leagues are going to break a record. The AAA, it jumped out at me, as I say. If they said it was up 8%, you say, all right, it's a quick thing to mention, but okay, who knows. But 58%, a jump of 2,100 home runs. That is ridiculous. So clearly there is something very different between the baseballs that Rawlings has made in Costa Rica versus China. What I don't know. I'm not cutting a baseball open to find out, and it ain't my business. But clearly, if you are a baseball fan, that is something to keep an eye on in the months ahead, because I can assure you it will definitely be a talking point, and it will be something that the league has to take into consideration, because on one hand, you've got the high level of baseball where ball's flying out the park, and there's been stories written about what's entertaining about the game. You've got high numbers of strikeouts, low levels of contact, and the ball is either leaving the park or it's strikeouts and nothing's happening. That the ball is not being put in play as much. And then at the same time, you see at the low levels of minor league baseball where it sounds like regular baseball is being played. What a novel concept. That it's not a home run derby every night. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Like I say, those numbers, that story just, like I said, was kind of peculiar, interesting, intriguing. Don't know where to kind of categorize it. If you've got a take on it, give us a call on the Davis Roofing Hotline. I believe we have secured the tickets at this point.
Yes.
The winner of those.
Our winner is Aaron Swede from Eugene.
So thank you, Aaron, for listening, and thank you for calling. You are the winner of the pair of tickets to tomorrow, the Saturday game between the Ducks and Wolfpack. But if you want to give us a call on the Davis Roofing Hotline at 541-343-KORE on this weekend's matchup between the Ducks and Wolfpack, between the Beavers and Hawaii, or, like I say, this rather peculiar and interesting baseball story, give us a ring. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. And welcome back to the program. Again, we look forward to certainly having some giveaways in the days and weeks and months ahead throughout the season. But again, thanks to everybody who called in trying to win a pair.
Bribery?
Easy for me to say.
Bribery.
Oh, well, hey, that always works.
We're not beyond
nice.
that. We're not
nice.
beyond that.
Not at all. Not at all. So again, thank you for everybody who called in, and we look to have several giveaways in, again, the days, weeks, and months ahead by way of tickets to Ducks, Beavers, and the like. We will be welcoming on momentarily Sean Keeler. He is a Colorado beat reporter for the Denver Post, and he covers that program. Obviously, Colorado coming off a pretty nice season-opening win over Colorado State in that rivalry. Mike Bobo had quite a bit to say after that game, which was rather amusing, got to say. But we will chat with him momentarily between that and obviously this weekend's game with Nebraska. The Bears and Packers are underway. They are scoreless and underway, but nevertheless, I believe the Packers may have gone 3 and out on their opening drive. It looked like Rodgers faced a little bit of pass rush there.
Got a sack. Yeah.
So definitely a slow start to the Packer offense, which I can't say is necessarily a surprise, as we heard from Ryan Wood yesterday. He thought the Bears were going to win. He covers the Packers for the Green Bay Press-Gazette. So when one of the beat reporters of the team tells you, yeah, the other team's probably going to – and in the NFL realm, they certainly could care less about who wins or loses. But when I heard that, I said, yeah, the Bears probably stand a pretty good chance here with their defense. We now welcome on Sean Keeler of the Denver Post. Welcome to the program, my man.
Thank you, sir. How are things going in the great Pacific Northwest?
Pretty good. Though certainly, I must say, for these two programs, they're coming off losses, unlike Colorado, who, granted, the level of competition may not have been quite the same. But nevertheless, a season-opening win for Mel Tucker and career-opening win as a head coach for Mel Tucker.
Let me ask you a question on that. What was the most expensive Auburn-Oregon ticket down there?
Good question.
Oh.
I did not look before kick what that ended up going for.
Or what the average highest, like the I'm stumbling this. I have about 18 radio drops today. I apologize. The lowest walk-in price.
Oh, I would think
was in the 200s, 100s?
No, the get-in had to be lower because, let's put it this way, there were plenty of open seats, and not to say that people weren't there. It's that building is so enormous.
It's huge.
So if you wanted to be up in way up in the rafters, I'm sure you could have found your way in for a probably even below face, quite honestly.
It's apples and oranges. Do you want to take a gander right now as of Monday what the lowest walk-in on Vivid seats was to Colorado, Nebraska?
And forgive me, but is the game at Nebraska?
It is at Boulder, so it's in Boulder.
It's in Boulder.
Basically half the seat. Yeah, basically half the seats of Jerry World.
So because Nebraska, and I know that fan base, I'm going to say that I will say the get-in price is at least $75 or $85.
Final answer?
I'll start there. Yeah, for the get-in.
Lowest get-in on Monday was $252.
Ooh,
$250. I mean, you could buy a season ticket to Colorado on the secondary market.
Yeah.
For every
the other
other
five
game.
home games add up to $94.
That's that Nebraska fan base, man.
Yep.
That is what it is. I mean, it's an old rivalry, and there's something to be said for it in the Colorado fan base to see it again too. But that Nebraska fan base, which does travel, it is an old rivalry. But goodness gracious, so certainly a lot of enthusiasm heading into this weekend, to say the least, around both programs. Go back though, Sean, to last week in that opener. Did you expect that? I mean, I know that Colorado was a 2-touchdown favorite. I actually took Colorado State to cover, but
I did too.
So clearly, you didn't think that was necessarily the way it was going to go.
No, I didn't. I had the Rams. I was the only of our three staff picks. I was the only moron that had the Rams to cover and the Rams and Buffs in the under. I had like 27-14 or some such, and it was 24-21 at halftime. Of a 45-minute lightning delay game, so I think that was like 10:30 at night. I just kind of threw my hands up and went, "Okay, this is my first Rocky Mountain Showdown. Clearly, the rules of normalcy and gravity do not apply." So I didn't expect a little whack Mountain West style shootout, which is what it turned out to be, because I bought into the Mel Tucker let's be Stanford West and no disrespect, or Stanford East and not Ducks East. And instead I forgot as you guys know, a very simple rule of regime change, and that is you're still trying to run Mel Tucker stuff with Mike McIntyre's players.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you get. So they got 52 as a shock, but I was more surprised that they gave up 505 stinking yards, which is not a good sign if you're a Buffs fan, with a much faster, better Nebraska offense coming their way.
For sure. Now let's talk to the high point, more offensively for Colorado. Obviously, Steven Montez, Laviska Shenault are quite the duo, and that's what is going to allow them, they hope, to be in as many. If they're going to be in shootouts, that's a pretty nice tandem to have if you're going to try and win shootouts. Especially with a defensive head coach. What do each of them bring to the table at this point? What were they looking to improve on in the offseason to make themselves even more lethal and effective and consistent? And that was the big thing for Shenault, I think, in the second half of last year, consistency, because he started so well. But clearly the scouting report got out, and boy, did they contain him a lot better in the second half. What is going to be the key for them to be able to be more consistent this season?
I think it's building up, and they tried doing this as much as they could in week one, is building up the other muscles around him, if that makes sense. If everyone knows where to go, I think K.D. Nix is a hell of a player, and he was actually pretty quiet, too, for the most part that game. Jalen Harris, their Auburn transfer tight end, got the first touchdown. They've run a lot more pro sets. They've run a little pistol, which offensive coordinator Jay Johnson ran at Minnesota. If you remember that last Tracy Clay's team before that weird scandal hit them, that was actually a pretty good team at Minnesota that beat Leach and Wazoo in that Holiday Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Jay was that was the same offensive coordinator who's with the Buffs now. So there's a little variety. There's a little bit of let's establish, again, to that let's be Stanford East a little bit. Let's try to run the ball. Let's try to be more tough and fundamental rather than spread them out and try to win a track. Again, we say that with a game that which is why I bought in, and then they both teams combined for 83 points, and I thought they can't change what they are, which is bad when you get in a game like that where you want to control the tempo, and Mel wants to kind of bring out his inner Big Ten and inner SEC, but it's good in that if they get down by 17 to the Huskers, and they could even at home, I don't feel they're going to feel that they're out of it because. You've got a guy with an NFL arm or at least an NFL body in Montez. It's certainly experience. who has that kind of trust. And you've got a guy like Chenault that's going to be, assuming he's at least 90% healthy, and we assume he is still, is going to be the best single player on the field still.
Oh, without question. No, on most fields that he steps on, he is absolutely the best player on the field. I mean, outside of, I would think, maybe one of the Utah defenders, Bradley Anae, for sure. Maybe Julian Blackman. Certainly a lot of the USC guys. But I would think in the Pac-12 South, I mean, like when they play UCLA, I don't care who's healthy or not. He's absolutely the health. I mean, you got to be kidding. And with Arizona State, I don't know yet. If you're talking about just pure talent and like next level ability, it's probably pretty close. Merlin Robinson may be, but you're talking about offensive defense. But no, Chenault's going to be the most talented guy on the field on most fields for sure, and maybe the most talented offensive player in the game.
So when they trail, I think they're, it's a weird thing where they could either get a backdoor cover or a back. I think it's the line's moved again, not quite like Broncos or Raiders has moved because of the Antonio Brown news, but it's moved. I think it's 3.5 last I saw. I mean, I could see a Buffs backdoor cover, or a Buffs backdoor win, or a Buffs backdoor anything because they're down in a wild game at the end. So if you're neutral or you're Pac-12 centric, or you just like seeing Huskers fans sweat, I think that could be a wild ending on Saturday.
I was going to say, I saw that this line was that close. So you really buy into it? You really think that this could be? I mean, it could be shootout-esque, because I watched some of the Nebraska game last Saturday, and I got to say, everybody who in the offseason was buying into all the metrics, buying into all the guys returning. I'm not one of them. I didn't think so. But this is a 4-point line that got bet down from opening at 7.5.
Yeah.
And a Colorado team that could not beat anybody last year. And it's a 4-point line with a 64.5 over-under. So they're not exactly expecting a total shootout here. At 64.5, what they're saying is they're basically saying 35-31. That's not wildly shootout-ish. It's high, but not wildly so.
It is if you're Mel. If you're Mel, that's shootout-ish.
Oh, if you're Mel, yeah. If you're Mel, that's
it's not by
brutal.
Standards, but by Mel standards, it's sheer. Yeah, I could see that to either side. I lean Huskers that way, and I had been leaning on them stronger. Although I know people walked away from that South Alp. Week ones are tricky, depending on who you've got. And week ones are tricky when you don't have a name marquee opponent, as the Ducks did, for example, where you're building up that that's your. This is their Oregon Auburn. Anything you're going to bring out, any impression you're going to leave on both sides. CU just wanted to get out of CSU help. The Huskers just wanted to give South Alabama the check and get it over with. This is different. This is the showcase game for both those folks, who both have trap games waiting on the other side, by the way, but that's a whole other conversation. That I think it's hard to get a great takeaway from week one because of that, because they weren't playing. I'd have to see you at the bigger game, and Lord help them if they had lost that one. And they had some moments in the first half where you just went, okay, speed is a problem. But whatever they've got, whatever you're going to unload, you've got to unload in this one. And I'd be shocked if they don't, on both sides.
Chatting with Sean Keeler, the Colorado beat reporter for the Denver Post. You can follow him on Twitter at Sean Keeler. That's Keller. Sean, with this rivalry, and again, because of its history, I don't know how much have you had a chance with the current players to really get into it? Do they? I mean, because I understand there's so many times, like, do they really know?
No.
I was going to say no, right? It's just kind of lost, which, I mean, I can't knock them for it. Look, it's. I mean, we're talking with 18 to 22-year-olds. They're not going to know. So, I mean, I literally had one. I heard one who literally lost the reference of The Wizard of Oz most recently. So that just tells you how old some of us are getting.
And I'm an old man, so I remember it full well. And I remember before it was Black Friday and all the red letters that Bill McCarthy used to leave under it. The best example of that we've gathered a few anecdotes on that. We'll have some more of that on Friday Online and Saturday's Denver Post. The safety from SMU, the transfer Onu, who had 2 picks in that CSU game, he just got here in his defense, and he said he wore a red, white, and blue shirt with a red top to training on Sunday.
Oh, dear.
As they were getting some treatment and walking around, and people just gave him the death stare. And he said, "What? Why? What's the big deal?" He said, "Man, no red this week." And he goes, "Nobody told me that. That's not how we roll at SMU." He's like, "You're not at SMU." And he went to a breakfast place and got a burrito, and undergrads and alums are giving him death stares. And he said, "I got the picture pretty quick, and nothing red the rest of the week." So they're figuring it out. It is hard to kind of explain what that was, but I kind of likened it to someone earlier in the day that I don't know that it's these players' Super Bowl. They don't grasp what that was, but by golly, it's the fans' Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. They know, and they want it bad, and that's why another reason the prices and the demand are what they are.
Yeah, I was going to say, for the fans, this is going to be heated now. I can imagine, because like you say, the cost to get into this one is twice as much for the rest of the season combined. So yeah, this matters a whole heck of a lot. And believe me, there would be a lot of folks who would love nothing more, not just in the Boulder area. There would be a lot of folks nationally who would love nothing more than to see Colorado and Mel Tucker get a signature win early and send Scott Frost out the door with his tail between his legs. Because he is not exactly the most dynamic by way of personalities, to say the least. Where is
I think Larry Scott would be rooting for that too.
Yeah. Where you've mentioned the defense, and obviously that it's not to the Mel Tucker standard yet. Where, Sean, is it at this point? Because like one thing that caught my eye in the offseason, you mentioned Jalen Harris, the Auburn tight end who transferred. When they announced John Tavius Johnson, who now is not there, I believe it's either South Alabama or UAB. I can't remember. I think it's UAB. But when they announced him, having covered that program for the prior 6 years, and I went, oh, dear. If Colorado is that desperate, because this is a young man who went through multiple knee injuries and really had essentially not played a damn snap in his career, if he was the grad transfer that they were looking for in the portal, I'm going, oh, mercy, could that defense need some help? So where is this defense at this point? Because clearly they're in need of a lot of personnel help.
Yeah, it's still in need of some help, and it's in need of some speed. I think Dante Wright, the freshman that we hadn't seen much of at CSU practice, largely because they were closed, but a name that we weren't as familiar with, he's still running. I mean, they still haven't tackled him. I think you're still young up front, and what surprised me most about last Friday in that opener was Nate Landman didn't just get isolated; he's missing tackles left and right. They're actually targeting this guy who's supposed to be one of their best three defenders, along with Mustafa Johnson, and you struggle to name folks. Again, 505 yards, and they forced 4 turnovers. And Lord help them if they – and Onu's were both acrobatic things falling out of bounds in both cases in his 2 picks. I mean, if you're a Rams fan, you're furious that you didn't score at least 40, 45 in that game. So, again, that would Mel Tucker being really very, very stoic, kind of calm guy. Just said, this gave me a really good look about what we can do and what we can't. And I had to think that he probably took some for a guy who won by 21 points. He probably took a little Pepto-Bismol when he got home. He was glad to get the win as a first-time head coach, but I had to think, man, we really are going to have to show the most improvement from week 1 to week 2 on that end and tackling in space, because what is that UCF, to some degree, old Oregon Frost offense? It's just that. It's just finding guys who can't do that in space and can't run with guys and can't wrap up guys and making them look bad time and again and yakking yourself to death. So I guarantee you there have been a lot. You can't make up speed at the last minute, but he's certainly going to drill them on fundamentals. I'd be shocked if they hadn't been beaten that down to death the last 4 or 5 days.
Sean, we'll get you out of here on this, and I want to ask you for a weekend score prediction because, frankly, it's not a Pac-12 game, though it's a pretty big one for sure. What is reasonable to ask of Mel Tucker in year 1? Because he just gave that fan base a rivalry win that I understand what the history of that rivalry was, but he gave him that. He's now got this marquee game that certainly not – I don't know if a lot of people are expecting a win. The line is interesting to me, that people actually expect it to be this close. But what is reasonable to ask of Mel Tucker in year one of what is going to be a pretty big rebuild?
I think when you've got that many big boys in the North Division still, and it's something that's just stacked. I mean, the cards are so stacked against you that way, where you don't get a break, that anything more than 4 victories would have to feel pretty good, and it would depend on, subjectively where those 4 are. If you beat FC at home, people will feel good about that. You win Saturday, you're going to get so much more political rope, as you imagine. It's not so much the number of wins as it is, it's, the quality, more so than the quantity, and showing some kind of progress for what things are going to look like. If there's no old adage about it. Coach will say, I want to be playing my best ball in November, or I want to be playing better at the end than I am at the beginning. Well, there's clearly some room to grow from the beginning. And we're saying this after a 21-point win, that, they didn't look very good. And that's sort of a double-edged sword. So they'd have to look a whole lot better in week 2. They get Air Force in week 3. Again, that's a whole other discussion because, basically welcome to Princeton in basketball, where, you're going to get bit if you're not ready to go, especially as bad as they look tackling in space. I think you're looking at 4 and up and learn to get an upset somewhere that sticks with people. And if you get a bowl, great. If 6 feels like a ceiling, you can make it, awesome. But 4 with some quality, I think, to be a minimum baseline.
Thanks so much for joining us, Sean. Look forward to having you on ahead of that Friday night game between Oregon and Colorado.
All right, take care, guys. Thanks so much.
You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. And as we wrap up another fine program, just giving you an update on the Bears and Packers, the NFL's official kickoff game to the 2019 season. Bears lead 3-0, 1:50 to go in the first quarter. Bears have possession at their own 10-yard line. So that game underway. We thank our guests, Chris Murray of Nevada Sports Net and Sean Keeler of the Denver Post, for joining us today. Look forward to having on Sean again later in the season, again ahead of that Colorado-Oregon game on Friday night in October. That'll be certainly one of the bigger games of this weekend. He's right. I was kind of surprised to hear the get-in price being that high. That is... I mean, I know it. Look, I know about the history of that rivalry, but I'm sorry, you can't get me real juiced up for those 2 particular teams right now. In particular, Colorado, just because I know. Look, they're in a huge rebuild.
Well, it's an old Big 12,
right? No, I understand. I get it, and I understand the Nebraska fan base and how well they travel and how they can create demand in a road stadium and all that. I understand it, but man, Colorado again. Look, they were downright awful last season. So that's why I'm kind of surprised that the line is 4, because that is, wow. Needless to say, that will be among the games we will pick tomorrow on Hold All Tickets, our Friday pick segment. We will definitely be picking it, 1, because it's a Pac-12 game, and 2, because if you can't read between the lines of where I'm thinking, and it gives me no pleasure to do so,
you're going against the pack.
And that one,
you're going against the pack.
I don't know how you can. I'm sorry. I mean, look, I'm not buying into everything with Nebraska. I am not. I was not at all blown away or really impressed with what that offense looked like in their opener with South Alabama. But man, they're just playing better than what Colorado is right now, in my view. Now, look, I'd love to be proven wrong. Trust me. Of the personalities involved, Mel Tucker is a lot more likable guy. And obviously in the Pac-12 sense that it would gain a pretty nice win, given all of the hullabaloo and hype surrounding the Nebraska program. Believe me, I would love nothing more. But, yeah, I don't know how you can... I really don't. I don't know how you can pick Colorado to win the game.
I'm curious to know, Oregon fans, if you're cheering for Scott Frost or against him.
That would be interesting to me. We
should bring that up tomorrow for calls.
We definitely will.
Yeah.
We definitely will, because that one would be amusing. To Oregon State, because we'd be remiss if we did not mention them a little bit today. There were some obviously they're basically wrapped up their availability. I believe they might even be airborne already because they were leaving tonight to head to Honolulu to be there to do walkthroughs tomorrow. Saw a couple of quotes that came out of availability talking with Canzano. Well, first, Jonathan Smith was on with Canzano yesterday and said in reference to Oklahoma State's offense, I think they're a great offense, but we made them look better than what they are. Well, yeah, that may hold true at the end of it, but ultimately, your defense has also got to have some major corrections. And Jonathan Smith, to his credit, has talked about that as well. But because we talked about Jamar Jefferson's quote that drew a little bit of scrutiny, to say the least, here was a quote from senior safety Sean Wilson. He had 12 tackles in that season opener. Said as far as his doubt creeping in about the team and whatnot, he said maybe in the outside world, but not in here at all. We just have to finish. We have to keep that intensity. Once we make a mistake, we kind of fall off. Well, that's certainly a little bit more encouraging from him relative to compared to what Jamar had to say as well. So we'll hear more from Oregon State and Oregon again tomorrow. You've been listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene.